for the sewer authority of Midcoastside for April 20, 2022. Are we going on to May? Is that possible? Yikes. Okay, so could we please have a roll call?
Director Dye.
Here.
Director Lohman.
Here.
Director Clark.
Present.
Director Slater-Carter.
I'm here.
Director Penrose.
She's here.
I'm here.
Very good. Chair Rada.
Here. Welcome. So, it looks like we don't have any anniversaries this evening.
No, normally it comes in the first meeting of the month.
Okay. So now's the time for public comment. This is the opportunity to discuss things on the consent agenda or things that are not on the regular agenda. So I see Greg has his hand up, so I'll call him first. Greg?
Thanks. I've got 3 things I wanted to ask about, and I'll understand if we don't have answers for these today. The first is the protection of the electrical plant. I recall that we had a presentation, and I wanted to know what the status of that rewiring and redesign was. I also wanted to know what the status of any short-term solution, I think Scott Boyd called them coffer dams, would be to protect that building in the time it might take to get around to a longer-term solution. And then finally, the other issue is wet weather storage, which we brought up some time ago. And Debbie, you asked me to correspond with John Dowdy, and I did. I've traded a bunch of emails with him. I'll note that Pacifica had a big spill a while back, about a decade ago, and they had to do wet weather storage as the first thing. Of course, they underdesigned it and maybe misoperated it because it didn't solve the last October problem. But the Regional Water Quality Control Board made them do it. So I hope to speak to John. It seems we might have a differing fact foundation, but I'm trying to understand. And then certainly money's expensive these days. Pacifica is facing a 73% cost of borrowing on the loans they're pursuing. That's a 4% mortgage over 30 years plus some issuance costs. That adds 73% of the cost of assets. So I also wonder if the Regional Water Quality Control Board could advise us on grants and or our wet weather storage needs based on SAM's configuration. And finally, speaking of money and capital, thanks to each of the agencies for your information on asset inventories. I'm still awaiting information from MWSD. I have some clarifying questions outstanding with John Dowdy of Half Moon Bay. And I just got the GCSD financials, and I'll have some questions for them as well. I'm going to produce an assessment of capital adequacy for a bunch of the San Mateo County districts, and I'll confirm my numbers with each agency before I publish them. So that's a lot, but thanks.
Yeah, I can just give a brief response. So I know that the response to your email is imminent. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but I was told it would be out today or tomorrow morning. And as part of our response, we've reviewed our hydraulic analysis, so that the response will include some information about that. So we're not ignoring your letter, but we want to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's before this time. So, Tim.
Hi, that's me. Obviously, I just wanted to sort of bring something up that I recently watched one of the local district meetings, and it was kind of disturbing because there was an article in the paper recently that a resident had written, and the members on the board of the meeting I was watching, they made the assumption that I had direct input on what this gentleman wrote in his article. And I just want to be clear that that was not the case at all. So I would appreciate if you did not do that again. And I'm not going to name names, but you know exactly who I'm talking about. That's it. Thank you.
You're muted, Chair Radek.
I don't see anyone else raising their hands to speak. So I am going to move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that members or the public would like to pull? Or is there a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
I will second.
Okay, so motion by Barbara Dye, second by Kathleen Slater Carter. Can I have a roll call, please?
Director Dye,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Chair Radek.
Yes. Okay, moving on to regular business, item 4. Item 4A is discuss real-time information to improve treatment process performance by Sentry. I guess we'll have a presentation by staff.
Yes, so we have a presentation by Sentry, but before I go there, just wanted to let everybody know that we've got this Sentry system at the SAM wastewater treatment plant, and that is currently on a pilot trial basis. We're planning on having it for the next 6 months. We've installed it a couple of weeks back, and we're just in the process of calibrating it. But there's a gentleman from Sentry, that's Tim Truax, who's going to make a presentation on the Sentry system. And at the end of it, I will actually show you a live input into the system that we have installed at SAM. So let me introduce Tim Truax, and I'm going to allow him to share his screen so that he can go ahead with the presentation. Tim, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kishan. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here to provide you with a brief overview of the system that we have installed at the wastewater treatment facility. Give you a little background on the information or on the system, how it works. I myself have been a wastewater treatment plant manager for the past 40 years. Most recently, I was the manager of the Bend, Oregon treatment facility. Prior to that, I worked as a consultant for a contract operations company in the Midwest. When I retired from Bend, I told the CEO of Sentry that I thought that he had a revolutionary product. I had installed it at the city of Bend, and told him that I'd be happy to help him promote the technology. So with that, I'll just share my screen and talk a little bit about our system. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Again, I'm Tim Truax. Sentry Water Tech is the URL of our website. If you are interested, I would encourage you to visit that location. That phone number is my cellular phone. It's the one that is the best method for communicating with me. Sentry likes to use the notion of problem statement to be able to capture the issue that is affecting our clients' facilities. Those kinds of problem statements may be fluctuating influent wastewater characteristics. It may be changes to the biology that is naturally occurring at wastewater treatment facilities. It can be associated with the cost of operation of those facilities. And we find that there are limited tools that are available for our for monitoring wastewater. The image in the inset there is a couple sensors, not the Sentry probes. The characteristics of wastewater are very harsh from a monitoring point of view, and most of the sensors that are installed in treatment facilities fail because of the harsh characteristics of those biology. When they fail, we find that the solution is manual sampling, which is time consuming, and it provides only a limited bit of information, a snapshot in time, if you will. The Sentry system has been installed in every continent in the world, most recently in Australia. We have a large deployment in the city of in Singapore, but as you can see, we have locations throughout North America and some in South America and Africa as well. Biological imbalances is the catchphrase that we use to discuss the changes to influent characteristics and the effects on the treatment plant performance. Biological imbalances can take generally two forms. They can be toxins, which are, will kill off biology that is used at the wastewater treatment facilities, or it could be slug loads, that is organic material that overwhelms the capacity of the treatment plant to produce a quality effluent. When we have an overload condition, there's potential for over aeration and additional sampling. There's risks of effluent quality issues leading to fines or some other regulatory burdens. For instance, a regulatory agency could impose an industrial pretreatment program for a facility that is normally not required to have one less than 5 million gallons a day. It could, in worst case situation, lead to things like building moratoriums, which would be a death knell for several communities if they could not build new homes. Current sampling and sensors typically end up missing the events because they are, the samples are taken at intervals that allow those toxins or slug loads to pass by the sensor. The Sentry platform consists of three things. The first is a sensor. The picture on the left is an indication, or it shows the sensor being installed in a pumped flow. The center image is the NEMA 4X panel that has been installed. The probes, more than one can be connected to it. And then the third component in our platform is the dashboard on which the data that is generated by our sensors is displayed. At the heart of our system is a sensor that is, in essence, a microbial fuel cell. What the arrow points to, the large arrow points to the sensor electrodes. We have an anode and a cathode. The biology, the biofilm that causes most facilities or most sensors to fail actually grows on the anode. And as the carbon compounds in the wastewater are consumed by the bacteria that have been seeded onto the anode, a small electrical current is generated. The genus of the bacteria is referred to as Geobacter. It's an obligate anaerobic bacteria, so atmospheric oxygen is poison to it. That's pretty dense discussion of the technology behind it. I'd like to stop here and ask if anyone has any questions about what they have seen so far. Okay. Barbara?
Thank you. So the bacteria collects on the anode, yes, and then affects the current that goes to the cathode.
Yes,
sorry.
Yes, that's correct. We
By changes in that current, you can detect specific problems in the wastewater because of what is on the anode.
The bacteria that we inoculate the sensor with use simple carbon compounds for their respiration. Whereas people and most other organisms respire to atmospheric oxygen and create carbon dioxide as a result, the bacteria on these sensors are specific and they respire to metal. So they generate an electron that goes to the metal of the metal sensor plate.
On the cathode.
On the cathode, that's correct. And we are measuring the rate that electrons are flowing from anode to cathode.
Great, thank you. That makes sense.
Okay, great. The system is fairly simple to install. 2 or 3 hours of installation is typical for one of our installations. The panel is supplied with a SIM card, and so our panel generates a cellular signal that communicates with our servers. And Kishan will show you an image of the dashboard at the SAM facilities. In some facilities, because of their location, the clients choose to connect to their own internal Wi-Fi system or using cables connect to their SCADA system either through an internet port or a hardwired 4 to 20 milliamp twisted pair. We have conversions through the standard modifications, Profibus and Modbus. Our clients can download the information that appears on our dashboard at any time. That's it's your option to download that information. The panel draws very low power, 24 watts, so it's just plugged into a standard household plug. Most of our deployments have 1 to 2 panels with 2 to 4 probes on each panel. At the Sewer Authority Midcoastside, we have 2 sensors located at the facility. One is before primary clarification and one is after primary clarification. The image on the inset here, the large image, is actually a picture of the installation at the facility. Tim or Kishan could probably tell us which one of the 2 sensors this is. But we asked that the sensor be removed prior to developing the correlation between our signal and some of those other measures of organic matter that are more familiar to wastewater facility staff.
Did you want to know which one that was, or?
Sure, Tim.
It's the primary effluent one. So
okay. So this is that signal has been a little bit higher than the influence sample, and we could talk about that if you'd like. This image on the right-hand side shows 2 sensors which were very scientifically installed at this facility with duct tape. One of them was installed in May 2019, and the other was installed in October 2020. There was no maintenance on these sensors at all due to the onset of COVID and the social distancing and the limitations of staff at this particular site. But we wanted to point this out because the sensor signals actually modulate fairly closely together, even though they have had no maintenance. And by no maintenance, I really mean no maintenance. They were in the water for that period of time and were not even removed for inspections. We have found that our sensors can be installed in several locations within treatment plants. 85% of our deployments start where the Sewer Authority Midcoastside has deployed them. We're looking at the influent of the wastewater treatment plant because that generates the most information about the characteristics of wastewater that Kishan and staff need to deal with. Many times our clients will say, okay, we understand what is coming into the facility, Now we want to know where it's coming from. And so one direction to redeploy or deploy other sensors is out in the collection system. We have a large deployment in Singapore where the Public Utilities Board is looking at eliminating all possible toxins entering the wastewater treatment plant, because the effluent from that wastewater treatment plant is actually going to become the drinking water of the city of Singapore in the not too distant future. We have installed sensors in other locations. Our original sensor installations were in anaerobic digesters. The organisms that live on the sensor can detect volatile fatty acids. So a typical installation for anaerobic digesters is looking at ways to increase the amount of biogas produced in the digesters. That can reduce the natural gas cost, or if a facility generates electricity as a result of burning that methane in a cogen system, the entity can generate electricity as a result. We have them installed in all kinds of different places. We have sensors in aeration basins for aeration optimization, which is a way to reduce the cost of electricity used to generate air for the bugs that live there. We're also looking at ways to increase biological phosphorus removal performance by measuring the volatile fatty acids that are created in those specialized reactors. So many potential deployment applications. Again, most of the deployment starts in the primary clarifier. The advantage over, the most significant advantage over other methods of measuring organic matter, other methods of organic matter, what we refer to as OMOM, is that the sensors are generating a signal every minute. So every minute a data point is sent to the dashboard, and that gives a very clear picture of the performance or the characteristics of the wastewater entering this facility in this particular case. We have estimated that for the sewer authority Midcoastside, you may find that as a result of learning more about the patterns of wastewater entering the facility, that you may be able to save $25,000 a year in electrical costs if the signal that we generate is tied into SCADA systems, which would lower the aeration output as a result of the lower organics entering the facility. Many treatment facilities, and I'm not sure about SAM, but many of the treatment facilities have dissolved oxygen sensors that will control blowers or control the amount of air supplied. But typically those dissolved oxygen sensors are located further down the process, and so they are feedback, they are reacting to changes that has already occurred. We have also guessed that there could be a significant potential revenue increase if you are not charging enough for wastewater treatment for any industrial or commercial entity that may be generating and discharging more than the sewer use ordinance allows to be discharged into the facility or into the collection system. So we're able to detect organic loading and toxic shocks. We have the potential to provide a feed-forward real-time signal for control of treatment processes. Those changes allow for operational actions to adjust the plant based on what's coming into the facility. Part of the deployment that has occurred at SAM is the technology, it's the hardware. But the other part of what Sentry offers is the service of analyzing with your staff the signals that are generated and making decisions or making suggestions for different decisions about how the plant might be operated to reduce costs or increase revenue. And that is the end of my brief presentation.
Yeah. Tim, if you could stop sharing, then I can jump onto our website.
Yes, there you go.
Okay, let me just quickly see if I can log into. So as Tim mentioned, we have two sensors, one at the influent and one at the primary effluent. And so this is actually giving you real-time measurement of what is called as a carbon consumption rate. And we are in the process of calibrating it or relating the carbon consumption rate to COD. We just started the process last week. We need to take about 20 samples, build a database, and then compare it to that specific time. Now, if you take one particular thing, let's take this one. So this gives you real time. So see this at 7 o'clock, it's measuring, it gives you that value. And you can also set alarm notifications saying that you can set certain levels saying if the COD, the chemical oxygen demand, increases to say 500 or increases to say 1,500, then an alarm will be sent and you get an email notification. And this can also be connected to the SCADA. And just like how we see all other SCADA data, we can do that on a real-time basis. This is just an example I wanted to show it to you, but see the time now is 7:30, and this is what is measuring. At 7:30, you get the influence. So this is the technology where sitting at home, sitting remotely from the place, you can get the measurements while the COD, the chemical oxygen demand, in case we need to measure it, somebody would have to collect the sample and then process it in the lab, and that takes about 3 hours for us to get the results. So while this to get real-time results, it's easy for us to modify the process or make any adjustments required if we find any drastic changes. So I'll stop sharing and then we can go for questions. Yes, Barbara, did you want the screen or should I stop sharing?
Doesn't matter. I have a quick question, and I might have more questions later. Does it also measure BOD?
I would leave it to Tim Truex, but I think BOD is not that accurate because it's a 5-day process. So that's why normally everybody does COD.
Okay, thank you.
So
yes, more questions.
Yes, to build on that, the traditional measures of organic matter are BOD and COD. BOD takes 5 days to produce a result, and it's subject to interferences, either toxins or special conditions, like you have to have 2 milligrams per liter of oxygen, otherwise the test is invalid. If you don't have 1 milligram per liter left in the BOD bottle, the test is also invalid. Things like changes to the dilution water that can also render the test invalid or not reliable. One of the documents that Kishan shared with you was a sample document of why traditional methods of measuring organic matter are flawed or not as useful as actual minute-by-minute readings.
Greg?
Well, I think this is fascinating. Given the slow, time-delayed feedback loops in a sewage treatment plant, I'm dying to build a model that shows how SAM behaves, but that's not my job. So my questions are, how often do you have to recalibrate to ensure the accuracy of the readings? the remote, I think you mentioned you had a remote one you could put in a collection system. Is that battery powered? You know, can you talk a little bit about how you deploy that and how long you have to leave it? And then Kishan, on your graphs, it looked like the effluent had higher COD than the influent. I didn't understand that.
Kishan, would you like me to
Yes,
try and address those? We do not have a system that is battery powered. If it was to be installed in a collection system, it would still need a 120 volt plug at some adjacent location. The sensors come with up to 175 feet of cable length. So we can install a sensor one location, install a panel in a different location, or at least separated by up to 150 feet. The challenges in installing in sanitary sewer systems is that the rags and other debris which are in sanitary sewers can follow the sensors. They can get wrapped around the sensor. There are some deployment installation diagrams that we've provided to Kishan and Tim that would allow you to make good choices about where those sensors could be installed in sanitary sewer systems. The other question that you asked, Greg, was about calibration. The sensors actually don't need to be calibrated. What Kishan is referring to is a correlation between COD and our carbon consumption rate to develop that relationship between those two values. We don't have temperature compensation circuitry in our system yet. That is a future improvement that we're looking at. And so we would want to see seasonal changes or seasonal comparisons of CCR to COD. So for example, as wastewater temperature decreases, the activity of the organisms living on the sensor will decrease. And so we'll have a decreased CCR signal, but because the BOD test is normalized or the COD test is normalized in a reactor, we would want to check that relationship throughout the course of the year to see if it's drifting at all.
Tim, could you also explain why the effluent, the primary effluent is value higher than the influent?
We're not absolutely certain about this. We have a couple working hypotheses. One of them is that as solids settle in the primary clarifiers, before it is removed periodically by operations staff, there may be some fermentation of the sludge that has settled. And so the fermentation byproducts of that settled sludge could cause the Sentry signal to go up. The proportion of small chain, short chain volatile fatty acids is going to be higher in the primary effluent than it is in the primary influent as a percentage. So that's what we're thinking is going on. We've seen this, I saw this in Bend as well when I installed the sensors there. My primary effluent signal was higher than my influent signal. It didn't concern me. I was making decisions based on the primary effluent signal, how much sludge to waste, how much to change the air that I was applying to the aeration tanks, et cetera.
I have a question. Is there a designated like margin of error in terms of the data output?
This is one of the most difficult parts of explaining the benefits of our sensor. Most of the measures of organic matter that people are familiar with are based on the concentration of pollutants in the wastewater. Our sensor is generating a signal based on the rate that the organisms are converting those carbon compounds into electrical signals. So there is a disconnect, I guess, is a simple way to say it, between the signal that we're generating and what has traditionally been used as a measure of organic matter.
So you're seeing the change, but it's not quite a fine resolution mechanism.
It's not an absolute value. That's correct, and that's why when Kishan first mentioned the interest in our system as a way to monitor what's coming into his plant, I said to develop confidence that our signal is a good predictor of COD, you really need to look at the correlation between the COD values and the CCR values that we generate.
So a layer of interpretation is required from staff to make decisions or to assess the current condition. So it's like one tool in the toolbox, but some additional interpretation is required.
Yes, we
are. Is training required for staff to use this system?
I guess I'd defer to Kishan and Tim to answer that question. Certainly, it's easy enough to log into the database of our signals, but the interpretation of the signals, I think, does require training and evaluate, and some kind of coordination.
Thank you. I think Catherine had her hand up first.
Thank you. I noticed that you commented that the your company offers service in helping to interpret the information that's coming in. Is that like 24/7? Is it tied into our SCADA system? How is it? Is it human or computer algorithms?
No, it's human interaction. The signal generates a data point that SAM staff can look at any time. We provide consultation services to staff to be able to say, here's what we think is happening. So just this past week, let's see, on the 15th of April, staff removed the sensors to be able to inspect them, and the signal on the dashboard dropped as a result of exposure to atmospheric oxygen. We also saw the signal drop off when there was a power outage. So some of what we see, we want to be able to help explain to staff and help them get some value from that signal. How would you use that information going forward?
And that is an add-on to a monthly add-on, or a based on usage? How does that work?
No, that's part of the trial that you're engaged in. So the Sewer Authority is spending $4,900 for a 6-month trial that includes a report that will summarize the findings that we've been able to generate as a result of interpretation of those signals. So that is included in the trial cost.
Barbara?
I may have misunderstood, but it sounded to me as if you were also saying that the data, which by the way sounds like a very useful system and seems good to have this additional data, that it could also give you information about the types of input that were potentially causing problems in the plant. Was I wrong to sort of pick up on that, or is that indeed something that this system might be able to do?
The short answer is that it will tell you when there is a spike in the influent BOD, or it could tell you that there is a toxin that has entered the plant. Even rainwater is interpreted as a dilution of the wastewater, and so rainwater would cause the signal to drop. It is a proxy for BOD and COD, but it doesn't tell you anything more about the source of the organic carbon that's present and being detected.
Thank you. That makes sense. That's clear.
Could I ask how much it costs to do the testing if you do it manually, COD, BOD, as compared to this? Kishan, you're on mute.
Yeah, the BOD itself costs close to about $500 per test.
And the COD?
The COD, normally we do it in-house, so it's kind of difficult to assess how much it would be.
How much staff time, Keishan, how much staff time would taking one sample of BOD run? An hour? And two people would have to do it?
See, the staff is not doing only this. They are also collecting the sample and carrying out other tests at the lab. So, but the process for determining the COD in the lab takes about 3 hours. We have to bake it in the oven and do a couple of things. By the time we dry it and then measure it, it takes 3 hours, a minimum of 3 hours for the result to come out. So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about saving staff time or anything.
So figuring $100 an hour for staff time and equipment and this and that, you're looking at $300 for that.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not looking at it.
I'm looking for a ballpark, football park, not even.
Okay. Yep, I go with that.
Yeah, so part of the problem is that, this data needs interpretation. Right. So that interpretation might require, additional sampling or testing. So this doesn't necessarily eliminate, additional manual testing. It's like he uses the word signal. So it's a signal that you have to interpret, and that interpretation might involve additional activities, costing time and money.
The hope here is that at the end of this correlation sampling and analysis that SAM staff is doing, we should be able to say CCR times some value equals COD within some range. So it would provide, again, a proxy for the COD within some cone of uncertainty.
Well, I think that we need, outside of this pilot project, which I think is a worthy activity, we want to have some firmer data about the value added, the benefits to SAM, in terms of cost or early detection or whatever it is. But we need, documents that, enumerates the value added that we would get with this and its cost benefits.
That's a typical request, is to tell us what the return on investment is. Absolutely.
Yeah. Deborah Penrose.
Yes, I think you've probably just answered my question, which was, will is it 5 months that the pilot program is lasting?
6 months.
6 months. Will that be enough time to figure out the correlation between the COD and the CCR? And I think you said that yes, by the end of the pilot program, we would have some numerical factor that we could use as a proxy to approximate the amount of COD that is present. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, I'm thinking that Kishan and staff would like to have that correlation between CCR and COD within the next month or so.
Ah.
Well before the end of the trial.
And the reason, once we've got that information, why would we continue with the trial? What more information will we get in the next 5 months, say?
Well, you're likely to see patterns of discharge into the facility that are unusual. I have been told that you may have some industrial commercial accounts that are discharging more wastewater or higher strength wastewater into the system than they are than the sewer authority is currently aware of. So that would be one value, is to be able to make adjustments to plant operations based on that influent characteristics changing, going high or going low. Again, many wastewater treatment facilities end up over aerating their wastewater, their activated sludge, to ensure that the effluent quality is meets all the permit standards. We do see some cases where some clients can make decisions about when to put tanks online based on the influent characteristics, which is there's a labor cost associated with putting tanks online, but there's also the additional cost of aerating more than one aeration tank, for example.
Thank you.
Sure.
Catherine?
You're on mute.
Oh, good, the dog has stopped. I'm sure Keishan has explained to you the problems that we had over the last year and a half or so with the COD and the BOD. What if we had this system in place at the very beginning of this problem? How soon could we have gotten the data so that we wouldn't have had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and keep running tests and experimenting with various additives to the system?
Kish and Tim, I think that's a question for you guys.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, Director Slater. We're still trying to get confidence on this product, so I don't want to comment on that as how accurate or how far away we would be. But definitely, with the measurement of COD that we are doing, we are able to make changes in the process and decide what needs to be done if we get high loads. We're already doing that now.
Within hours? Or within days?
Yeah, within days, I would say. Within a few hours.
Okay, and so it may not be perfect, but it's sort of a first level alarm that you need to be looking at things so you can take action much sooner on these problems.
Correct. Yes, you'll get an indication, I would say.
You'll get email notification that a signal has gone high or low based on the alarm bands that are set.
Okay. And who sets those alarm bands?
We set those in consultation with our clients.
Okay.
I'd like to move us along here. I'm going to take one more question from Greg.
Yeah, I wanted to revisit this issue that Deborah, you brought up about interpretation. I use the term calibration. It seemed to me that you have to calibrate this seasonally. I don't know, maybe sooner. But once you've got it calibrated, I don't see that there's any interpretation. You've got a confirmed number there that you validated from your testing and calibration. And even if you did get off in calibration, wouldn't there still be value to seeing the trends in real time and being able to adjust? The percentage changes is important, even if the absolute number were expressed in Swahili.
We would agree completely. Influent wastewater characteristics can change over time. And so it does make sense to periodically do test, compare a CCR signal to the COD value to see if the correlation that has been established has significantly changed. That happens in some facilities that have seasonal influent characteristic changes. So large population increases in the summer months, for example, or when a fruit processor is discharging into the sanitary sewer system, they only discharge part of the year when they're processing their apples or cherries or whatever the case may be. So there are reasons to do occasional checks to see that the relationship between COD and CCR doesn't drift.
Okay, so this item was a discussion. Keisha, do you need any specific direction from staff at this time?
No, I don't need anything yet. This is just brought in for discussion and for giving an update about the technology available.
So I'm guessing this will be coming back at some point after the pilot.
Yes.
With more information and decision points. Okay.
Tim, thank you. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my rambling.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Goodbye now.
Bye.
Okay, item B is updated non-domestic wastewater source control registration, inspection, and permitting.
Yes, this is being brought to the board as an update to the inspection being done by TAS Consulting. The board authorized the general manager to enter into the contract with TASC in the month of February, and they went ahead and inspected about 10 establishments, and the permitting process is going on. So we have Tim Sudam from TASC who's present here, who'll be giving a short presentation, and we'll walk you through this process. So let me give control, to Tim. Tim, you can go ahead and share your screen, please.
Before Tim starts, could I ask that people mute themselves? I'm getting a lot of interference. Thank you.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, Tim.
Okay, and you can hear me too. Okay, good. Thank you, Kishan, members of the board. Thank you. Good evening, and we appreciate this opportunity. I'd like, first of all, to introduce myself and my partner, Leo Shemp. Leo has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. He has over 28 years of experience as a grade 5 operator for numerous public agencies. And he's also taught at wastewater classes as an adjunct professor at Palomar College to several wastewater treatment plant operators. Additionally, he has a grade 4 collection system operator's license and is very experienced at running wastewater treatment plants. And my background, again, I'm Tim Sudam. I'm a licensed chemical and civil engineer. I have worked almost 35 years in designing, permitting, constructing, operating, and maintaining water and wastewater treatment plants. And so we just wanted to point out that, although it's been mentioned, we've worked for a brewery, which we have. We both worked at Stone for about 7 years, ensuring compliance with wastewater discharge permitting and understanding the industrial rates that the city of Escondido charged Stone, and trying to minimize the operational costs to Stone relative to those industrial charges. So we're bringing this experience to facilitate the source control permitting that we're currently under contract to do with you. So moving along, wanted to address past actions. Our agenda is to address some past actions by the board and what we have done with SAM staff. Update you on the inspection and sampling results and the permit status, and then identify what the next steps are for the permit process. So in January this year, the board approved and opted to have SAM implement the source control program in accordance with Ordinance 1901. And then in February, enter into a contract with our firm to implement the permit for approximately 10 businesses, as Kishan mentioned earlier. These businesses consisted of seven beverage producing companies, one nursery, harbor, and a packaging fertilizer company. So we also started, as I mentioned, the permitting process last year. Shortly after the problems were identified in May and in August, we held a user discharge workshop to review the process with various dischargers. We also developed registration forms to begin gathering information about the various businesses, their operations and their sewer discharges and their operational practices. SAM also, we also worked with SAM to establish the permit guidelines and the procedures pursuant to the ordinance 1901. So we after the worker workshop, we requested the dischargers to submit the registration forms. We then utilized the forms to prioritize facility inspections. We commenced some of the inspections in October of last year. And then at that time, the board considered the member agencies implementing the source control inspections and permitting. And so we discontinued the inspections at that time. And then after, as I mentioned already, the board decided to have SAM implement the source control program. We inspected 10 of these businesses in February and March at the various member agency service areas. And these are some of the facilities in each of the service areas that we inspected. There's one in Half Moon Bay, one in Montara, and 8 in Grenada. So during the course of the inspections, 18 samples were collected from 9 of the 10 dischargers, and all but 2 were analyzed by SAM to reduce the cost of the dischargers. It was determined during the inspection of one facility that only domestic wastewater discharges were occurring, so a sample was not collected from that facility. And then 2 of the dischargers also opted to perform sampling and analysis using a certified lab on their own at their own cost. And those results are also included in this table. So this table, you can see the results indicate that 8 of the 10 businesses exceed the maximum allowable concentration limits for COD and BOD as defined in Ordinance 1901. And for this reason, we're proceeding with implementing source control permitting for those 9 facilities. And then using that inspection and registration information, we've categorized the dischargers into 3 categories. The first is a discharger who is not discharging waste to the sewer system, to SAM, above the maximum allowable concentration limits, but has the potential to. So they're generating waste above the MACLs, but their waste is side stream and discharged separately and not to the wastewater treatment plant. And there's 1 discharger in this category. The second category are again, small volume dischargers who discharge wastes above the MACLs to SAM's wastewater treatment plant. We call it the publicly owned treatment works. And there are 3 dischargers in this category. And then the third category are larger volume dischargers that also exceed the MACLs with their discharges. There are 5 in this category. We're requiring that meters be installed to monitor and report volumes, specifically for the processes associated with the non-domestic waste facility and operations. And 2 of the dischargers already have meters installed. So just want to point that out. So now I'll cover some of the permit requirements for each of the discharge categories. The first category of discharger will be required to submit monthly self-monitoring reports, SMRs as we refer to them, on a quarterly basis. And the discharger is expected to track and report volumes of the high strength waste that is disposed of off-site, that is not sent down the drain. We just want to make sure that they're doing that and they certify that. The second category, this is the small volume dischargers discharging to SAM sewer system, will also be required to submit monthly SMRs or self-monitoring reports on a quarterly basis. And we'll track and report both the high strength waste that's disposed of to the wastewater treatment plant, and then what is also disposed of off-site. And we basically been calling that side streaming, that waste that doesn't go down the drain. And then lastly, the third category of dischargers will be required to submit monthly SMRs. We're asking them to sample annually and implement best management practices and spill prevention plans. Several of the dischargers already have these in place. You can see from the photos here. The dischargers will also be required to track and report volumes of high strength waste, again, disposed of to SAM, and that is which is side streamed, disposed of off-site. So we're in the process of drafting the permits right now for the dischargers to review. We have drafts of each one of the categories done, and we're reviewing those with Kishan and Jeremy right now. We expect to finalize the permits and issue those by the end of May, and then begin monitoring the quarterly reports thereafter. And Kishan, that concludes my presentation.
Kishan, do you have any follow-up before we seek clarifying questions and public comments?
I think really maybe I had a letter from one of the person who's already here. Maybe he can speak as a part of the public comment.
Yes, so I will call on Craig Carroll. Craig, could you unmute yourself?
Hey, good evening. I think everybody read my letter, and I believe it will be included in the minutes, so I don't need to read the whole thing to everybody. I'm here for questions on it. It was pretty straightforward, but I don't feel I need to read the letter. Unless anybody didn't read it, then I can read it to you.
So I think it's important to clarify for discussion purposes that the concern was the fee. So we've just discussed the registration process and the permitting process, but there hasn't been discussion fee. It is mentioned in the staff report. And I know that the member agency manager had a discussion with staff this week. So how would directors like to approach this? Do you want to hear more about the fee that's being proposed from Kishan before we ask questions and proceed? This is just an update, so they're not asking for direction, but I'm guessing we can give direction depending on how the conversation goes. So. Kishan, could you?
I'd like to hear an update.
Yes. Yeah, at this moment, as you rightly said, Chair, we are not talking of any new type of fees. The fees has already been decided and adopted in the earlier resolutions in 2019. That's the 19-01 and 1905. So we're not making any changes right now. The letters which were sent out to establishments were as per the resolution where we've indicated payment for only the inspection as well as the sampling costs, if any. So that's $275 for inspection and $275 for sampling, wherever the case may be. That's all we mentioned in the letter that has been sent out to the establishments, and those are as per the adopted resolution. We are not talking right now about discharge fees or anything which is indicated in the resolution, and that will come up for discussion later on after we discuss it internally, discuss it with member agency managers, and then bring it to the board if the board would like to consider any change in the adopted resolution. You're muted, Chair.
I think you need to respond directly to Mr. Carroll. They're specifically calling out the per gallon fee, which is problematic. I mean, it's huge. And I know from talking to my own agency manager that, there's a feeling that these are a double fee and don't meet the nexus test, et cetera. So I think we need to address Mr. Carroll's concern this evening.
Correct. I'm not sure on what basis the discharge fee of 15 cents per gallon was adopted in the earlier resolution, 19-01. That was actually adopted by the chair, of course, and the resolution was also signed by Director Knight. But I'm not sure on what basis that was signed and accepted at that point of time. But we can always amend it or make a change or whatever, and can be brought back to the board at a later date.
Mr. Carroll, do you want to elaborate on your letter and point out your concerns?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the calculation was it was simple and it's not surgical, but 5 gallons to 1 gallon of beer is a generally assumed amount. And that is what that would be at 15 cents a gallon of fresh water. It seems odd to me that we're going to use a processed water flow, but I understand taking flow readings of wastewater is difficult because of pressure and inconsistent flows. I just think, this is just Dan and I because we quickly got together this morning to talk about it. But when this program is applied to all businesses on the coast side, the fees are going to be in the millions of dollars. And a lot of businesses can't absorb that. Hot Dogma's business is all based on beer. At least my business we could subsidize some of these fees using the restaurant and some of the off-site operations we do. But this would land on food producers and beverage producers squarely. I would imagine when these fees were adopted in 1905, in Resolution 2019-05, they weren't, as it says, they were meant to be a temporary in case of an emergency, I assume. But I can't imagine people were thinking of this scenario when those fees were decided upon.
Yeah, well, basically, we felt we needed an ordinance to meet, the challenge from the state board, and to move forward with the program. But that doesn't mean that we're necessarily happy with the fees. And as Keisha has pointed out, we can change those. There's some support for doing that. Director Dye?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First, this ordinance was meant to apply to all non-domestic dischargers. And at this point, we're just aiming it at, I don't know, whatever it is, 11, 13 businesses. There are others. I passed on to Kishan articles that popped up in my Half Moon Bay Google alert about a seafood processor in Washington State, which ironically was discharging problematic stuff into Half Moon Bay up there, a different Half Moon Bay. It is, I do, from my understanding, so this is a question I have, from my understanding, there are other businesses that are also discharging potential problems into the system. So that's my first question. My second question is about these fees. First of all, these two businesses are being required to add water meters, which can cost thousands of dollars. It turned out one of them, actually, there was a meter. And then that measures the fresh water that goes into their operations. Most of that water walks out of their establishments in the form of beer. The amount that is actually discharged is relatively small. So it seems to me that if nothing else, the fee structure should take that into account rather than measuring the water that's going into the facility, though that may be a proxy measurement, but you can't just, set fees based on the water that goes in when the problem is potentially the wastewater that goes out. And my last comment is a little bit different, but I have been talking to one of these businesses, and there are some concerns about the testing that's being done. One of these that had an independent third party come to access their BOD, and I'm not going to read all the numbers right now, but they did a 24-hour monitoring and, cleaned 2 tanks, sanitized another tank, and did more. And they got a total BOD of 3,200. So there seems to be some inconsistency in the testing that's being done here. I mean, both of these businesses, and they're the two that I've mostly been talking to, but I think this is applicable to potentially to others, are getting mixed signals about what they need to do. While it's all well and good to say right now we're not going to charge them this, we really need to modify this and make clear what the charges are from the beginning. It hasn't been clear to these businesses how much this is going to cost them. And again, the people running these businesses are environmentalists who care about our community. And one of them has made it clear to me and given me permission to say this, that if this kind of fee goes on, his business is potentially going to go out of business, and we lose what I think is a key facility, a key business that a lot of people enjoy in our community. So my questions are discrepancies in the testing, independent testing versus the testing that's being done. The question of the freshwater, measuring the freshwater that goes in and how that, is a proxy for actual wastewater discharge. If we have these fees in place, can we really put together for a later meeting something that's really specific so that these businesses know how much it's going to cost them to comply with these regulations, which is what they want to do. So those are my 3 real requests at this time.
Thank you, Director Dye. Counselor?
Yes, good evening, board members and Chair.
No answers? Okay.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
We'll get to that, Barbara.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Just maybe this will help. I've had some concern with the 2019-05, which was what set the fees back in 2019. And at this point, my recommendation was just to charge the industrial user inspection of $275. And where sampling occurred by SAM, the sampling and charge, which is another $275, and not to charge the temporary discharge fee. I do have a concern regarding how that fee potentially could be duplicative with charges for strength already being charged by member agencies. It has been approved. It has not been repealed, those charges. So I think, if SAM were inclined, it could make those charges, but I'm not recommending that at this point. So I think, as Kishan indicated, the people getting permits are going to get charged a maximum of $550 at this time. So that's where things are. I understand the concerns, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about it. We want to make sure that whatever, at least as your legal counsel, that whatever is being charged to individual users is consistent with Prop 26, proportional, and fair.
So to sum up, we can and probably ought to bring back the ordinance to discuss the rate structure.
And I'd just like to real quick to say that I'm sure Catherine, with her extensive business background, will understand the need for certainty and clear requirements.
Director Slater-Card? You're muted, Catherine.
in business, there is not a whole lot of certainty. But what I would like to know when this comes back, and maybe Timothy can help us with a little bit of it tonight, but certainly for when it comes back, I want to know what the industry standard is. There are industry standards that have developed since 2019, and Barbara, you are correct. It's not just breweries or wineries or distilleries of sort. There are, as was noted, it can be fruit or other kinds of food services and so on. I would think that knowing the most up-to-date standards is important, and one of the things we might want to consider is and Barbara, Montera charges our sewer rates based on how much water you use. So it's a fairly common way of making sure that it's fair, that you're sending X amount of fluid that needs treatment, and so you pay on a per unit basis essentially. And so one of the things I'd like to consider is looking at the huge range of numbers on that chart. I think those who are sending high amounts of stuff that needs to be treated maybe should pay a little bit more. And Jeremy, I would think that Montera does have strength factors in our sewer rates, but they're based on industry averages, not on great exceedances of what gets put into the system. So I like having some kind of incentive for people to maintain their equipment and keep track of what their strength that they're putting in is. Because it's again, I don't particularly want to pay in my sewer rates, nor I'm sure do my my users, for gross exceedances above normal that costs extra at the sewer plant. So I'm looking forward to finding out what the current practices for the sewer industry are, particularly in states that have stronger environmental restrictions on them. California is one. I don't think I know other states don't have the same problems. So something from Cleveland might not be of interest to this district, but perhaps Arcata might. So that's what I'd like. Thank you.
Greg, I'm going to engage the directors in the conversation first, and happy to take you at the end. Director Dye, do you have another question?
Yes, just a quick couple comments. One is we do need to resolve the issue of independent testers coming up with different numbers. I don't know how we do that. Also, we do charge by the amount of water people use also, but I don't know that there's any other business where most of the water that they use doesn't get discharged, except perhaps in bathrooms around the community. I mean, the beer goes out in kegs and bottles and people. It's not being discharged into the system. So that's just a point, and it just if the fees were fair, then the water that goes in could potentially be a way to measure what's going on in that facility, but it is not. the same as everybody else, that it really shows how much water they're discharging, number one. And number two, the businesses want to work this out and they have no problem with doing the reporting. They're fine with doing all that reporting. They want to make this work. They just want it to be fair. And they do not believe that their operations caused the upset at the plant. And really, there is no evidence whatsoever that they caused the problem. And let's be clear that we have not had a problem for over a year. So it's all well and good here to say that, you know, it's costing us money. We don't know that these two small businesses, we have no evidence whatsoever these two businesses are the ones who caused the problem.
I really don't want us to revisit that whole.
Okay, sorry, but
that we've had, you know, at many meetings. I think staff should be taking notes about the outstanding issues related to the fees that will need to come back to us and be addressed. But, you know, if you're a discharger, you're going to have to be permitted, and more permittees will be added, no doubt. But I don't want us to be on this cycle of just rehashing these arguments. We have an ordinance now. Now we have to address the fees, and just be sure as we, you know, monitor and enforce that we're doing it fairly. But I see that our counselor has his hand raised again. Jeremy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to briefly respond to Director Slater-Carter had a point about ensuring fairness, ensuring and seeing what others are doing. I mean, there's two ways for paying for programs like this. One is through user fees, and that's more shifted on the individual dischargers. And the other is just through kind of a general budget O&M approach. So you can do it either way. That's really a policy call for the board. But if you're going to try to go on a volumetric basis for charging, which was approved as part of 2019-05, you need to make sure you can really address what cost of service that's addressing and whether it's proportional or not. So if we're going to go down that road, and that's a policy call, we had proposed to have a very small but still important cost of service study associated with potentially future fees. Some of the member agency managers just didn't think it was necessary, that it was a expenditure of funds that maybe wasn't needed. So I'm sorry. If we are going to go that path, then we'll probably need to have that analysis done to make sure we can defend whatever user fees are ultimately proposed to the board on a volumetric basis. Thanks.
So I would recommend that perhaps we bring this discussion back to the Finance Committee to sort of develop a recommendation for the board to consider, or alternative recommendations about how to approach the issue of the fees. That or the Operations Committee, but I think we need to dig down a little bit and look at the questions that you've raised, Jeremy, and Catherine and Barbara's points. Would the board support sending to committee?
Yes.
Okay. I do see some hands continue to be raised. Those have lowered. All right. So we're back to Greg. Go for it, Greg. This will be the last.
I'm going to speak more on behalf of retail customers, who most of the people I represent. I think Catherine's idea of industry standard and what we do should be industry standard. That's a good thing to look at. I also am going to suggest that whatever we're charging for this program should pass two criteria. It should be cost neutral to other ratepayers so that the residential ratepayers are not subsidizing something that they didn't cause. But it also shouldn't be more than the sewer authority is actually incurring in its own costs. So the idea that we would collect millions of dollars of volumetric fees, that seems to me to be a violation of Prop 218 or whatever it is. we can only collect as much as we're spending above and beyond the normal cost of doing business without this level of exceedance, in my opinion. So that's a second criterion I would suggest. And the last thing I would point out, though, and this is the hard one, it's astounding to see the volatility in those BOD and COD numbers. So when there's a desire for certainty on behalf of the businesses, keep in mind that the plant doesn't have any certainty either. So I don't know how to solve that problem, but it's clear there is a volatility issue of some magnitude. So I hope you'll consider those two criteria about being revenue neutral to other classes of ratepayers and not collecting more than we're spending. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. So it looks like we have our work cut out for us on those issues. But so this is an update on the registration, inspection, and permitting. Does anybody have comments on those elements of the program that basically make the largest component of this staff report? And Timothy, do you have anything to add at this point?
Sure, Director Ronick. I wanted to respond to Director Slater-Carter's industry standard. What we've seen in the industry at typical wastewater plants is a strength charge for BOD and TSS, and sometimes even nitrogen and phosphorus over and above the typical design limits of a wastewater treatment plant. And typically, wastewater treatment plants are designed to treat BOD and TSS at their flow rates of 300 parts per million. So the industrial entity would be charged for pounds of BOD and pounds of TSS above the 300 concentration coming into the wastewater treatment plants. That's how the industry has handled this in the past at wastewater treatment plants. And then one last comment is, typically in the brewing industry, to make 1 gallon of beer, it requires anywhere between 5 and 10 gallons of water. And you can find that in the Brewers Association standard operating manuals. So you have one that ends up as product. The other 4 are either go down the drain or they're shipped off site somewhere. Or they boil off in the boil kettle. So there is significant volumes associated with the beverage producing industry that does go down the drain. That comment. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Director Ronick.
Thank you, Tim. Craig.
Quickly, that our fees just went from $50,000 to $100,000 per year. That's all. If it was 10 barrels.
Based on what? I'm sorry, Craig, can you?
Well, I did my calculation at 5 barrels per barrel of beer, and he said that it's between 5 and 10. So it was 48,000 and change for at 5 barrels to 1 barrel of beer. At 10 barrels, it would be almost $100,000.
Not insignificant.
All right, well, we're going to continue to look at this matter, correct, and try to find a solution that works both for our businesses and to protect the sand plant, correct?
Yes, we are. And right now we're going to move on to 4C. Thank you to Tim and staff for preparing the update, and we'll get this on a finance committee agenda and engage in further discussion with member agency managers, but we will crack this nut. Okay. So item 4C is request to ratify issuance of a purchase order to Stevens Diesel for replacement of engine on SAM 10 collections Vector truck in amount not to exceed $60,400.
Yes, this is regarding the Vector truck, which is the largest Vector truck that SAM has got. There was a breakdown on the Vector truck when it was coming back from service. There was a breakdown in the freeway, and then it had to be towed to Stevens Diesel. And upon initial investigation, it was found that there was damage in the engine, and the engine had to be replaced. Since this is the only large truck which SAM has got, we discussed it internally, and then I sent a message to all the board members and decided to treat this as an emergency, and we got the job going. So it's brought back to the board today to ratify the issuance of a purchase order, which was done earlier, because it was treated as an emergency. We do not have another truck, and in case of any sewer spills, this would be the only truck which will be available. Otherwise, we'll have to lean to other agencies to rent a truck or to borrow it from somebody. So as of now, we just have an estimate because we do not have an accurate figure right now, but it's estimated to be around 60,000. Any questions?
No, I move per staff recommendation.
I second.
I just want to point out a new truck would cost $300,000. So $60,000 is a good deal.
Correction. Correction, Chair. A new truck right now costs 600,000. We got a quote, but the truck which was bought earlier in 2016 costed us 350,000.
So the cost is just about double.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Dye.
Aye.
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Penrose.
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter.
Yes.
Chair Raddock.
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Item D, authorize general manager to issue a purchase order to RF McDonald for the purchase of waste heat exchanger in the amount of $47,213.
This item is already in the approved adopted infrastructure budget for the present year, and this is for the purchase of a stainless steel material heat exchanger, because what was used earlier was getting corroded pretty frequently, and this was the recommendation by the manufacturer. So this is being we've taken it back. So we've approached the same manufacturer, and he suggested the use of a stainless steel heat exchanger to overcome future problems. Any questions? Staff is here to answer.
Questions or a motion?
Move per staff.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Dye.
Aye.
Director Lohman. Director Lohman.
Yes.
Sorry. Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Penrose.
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter.
Yes.
Chair Raddock.
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to item E, the general manager's report. Kishan.
Yes. I'd like to make a short presentation on preventative maintenance that we carried out at this SAM plant last week. That was on April 20th, Wednesday, the April 20th, when we had to shut down the plant. I've just put together a couple of slides. Let me just share my screen, please. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So as mentioned earlier, this is regarding the plant shutdown and preventative maintenance of the switchgear, which was carried out on Wednesday, April 20th. So I'm going to cover the background and purpose of the plant shutdown and switchgear maintenance. I'm going to talk about major players and equipment, how we prepared for the plant shutdown, and what happened exactly on the plant shutdown, and what was the results and conclusions, what did we achieve, what did we gain by doing all that stuff. Let's go to the background and purpose first.
Excuse me, Kishan, could you
Yes.
keep this to about 10 minutes, please?
Sure. So what is preventative maintenance? This is maintenance regularly and routinely performed on assets to reduce any chances of equipment failure. As you all know, the switchgear is very critical to SAM's day-to-day operation, and this supplies power to all the plant equipment. It cannot be easily taken offline. So conducting preventive maintenance on this switchgear is a challenge because we need to switch off power to the total plant. The recommended preventative maintenance for switchgear is every 3 to 5 years. For the bus duct, it's every 5 years. The SAM switchgear was last inspected in 2020 and was due for maintenance in 2022. Bus duct was installed in 2018 and due for servicing next year. So the timeline of activities was the entire project was led by Carlos Mendez. He's our maintenance person. He was a project leader. He conducted this entire activity with other staff members. It was planned well ahead, almost 9 months ahead of time, with multiple meetings with staff and with vendors. It was initiated in August 2021, way back. That's how complicated it is. We received quotes from Eaton in September. The earliest availability for all parties was April 2022. And then we successfully completed the preventative maintenance of switchgear. So major players in equipment were SAM, of course, client and coordinator, Eaton doing the switchgear maintenance provider, PG&E, the electricity supplier, Calcon, the electrical contractor, Peterson, rental equipment supplier, and Hertz Rental was again a rental equipment supplier. So the equipments utilized were number of generators, and these were all rented out. We had the SCADA and administrative generator. This actually, we borrowed it from MWST. We had a rental generator for the blower, 150 kW, a rental generator for chemical area, a small portable generator for main plant PLC, a backup generator for main plant generator, and then we had a portable pump at the influent pump station. Now, preparation of the plant shut down. A day before the event, the technicians arrived with the rental generators, that's Peterson. Administrative building generator was hooked up well before. One day before, then Pacific States Petroleum had to come in and refuel all the generators. The portable trash pump was connected with necessary hoses at the influent pump station. The grid chamber and primaries were drained and heavy ragging was found at the grid chamber. So these are pictures of the mobilization where the generators have just started coming in. You see the 1000 kW generator being mobilized, the portable pump being mobilized, the fuel truck which came in for filling the generators. Then comes to the day of the plant shutdown. That was Wednesday, April 20th. And the activity started at 5 o'clock in the morning. We had Eaton, Calcon, and almost all of SAM's staff at 5 o'clock in the morning. Portola and Montara pump stations and Valimar pump stations had to be shut off so that there is no flow coming in. There's marginal flow coming in from the north. The only flow coming in from the north was from Frenchman's Creek and from San Pablo pump station. And of course, we had the flow coming in from south from Half Moon Bay. So 6:20 a.m., PG&E disconnected power. Eaton commenced the inspection. The grid chambers were being cleaned while the power was out by SAM staff. And at 3:30, Eaton crew completed the inspection and installation of the new power monitor. At about 4 o'clock, power was restored by PG&E, approximately 10 hours. So the aeration basin number 1, number 2, and the primary clarifiers 1 and 2, and the grid chambers were used for all the flows while the power was out. Approximately about 1.33 MGD on a peak was coming in to the plant while the entire major portion of the north supply was shut off. So here's the 1000 kW generator being hooked up, ready. This was on the day of the event. The portable pump for influent wet well. You see there are 2 portable pumps. We had to have 1 pump for using for the influent wet well, and the other one was a backup for this. In case this fails, we had to keep this ready. This is the backup portable pump. This is a blower hookup, generator for the blower hookup. This is the other picture of the generator for the blower. The blower hookup is done with the panel inside. This is coming into the blower room. Here's a generator for the chemical area being lined up. The primaries taking in the flow. Aeration basin 1 being filled up. The rags were being removed from the grid chamber. This is all confined space. We took advantage of this opportunity when there was no flows, when there were less flows coming in, and therefore we were able to clean the grid chamber 1. Here's what the fuses are being removed from the pole. PG&E were working on it at 6 a.m. You can see the person in the crane there, mobile crane, going up and removing the fuses. Now coming to the best part, the results and conclusions. We got a verbal report from Eaton. We are expecting a written report very soon. But the most of the switchgear is in a good condition, except for the main power feed from the switchgear to the plant MB2 building and to the digester building. These two parts showed significant signs of deterioration, which could lead to total loss of functionality. A full report is expected in 2 weeks' time. So the conclusion is the plant shutdown was a successful event, all thanks to SAM staff, member agencies, and vendors. The switchgear inspection shows the value of preventative maintenance. It found deficiencies that could lead to more serious issues if not discovered and treated early. We need to address that ASAP. So we are waiting on some proposals from vendors. This exercise also provided SAM with experience that will prove useful to similar events in the future, in the sense that when we plan on doing the bus duct maintenance next year, we know what we are in for. So that concludes my presentation.
That's a lot of coordination that happened in advance and on the day.
You bet, yes.
Totally amazing. Director Penrose.
Excellent job, Keishan. Thank you, and thank you to the staff for such hard work and for doing such a thorough job. My question is, if we found that the power coming through the main switch gear was in such bad shape, and we had examined it 3 years ago, shouldn't we be doing more frequent checks?
Yes, I would say the recommended is 3 to 5 years. So we actually did 3 years. We are lucky that we did 3 years because there has been a drastic reduction in performance. I mean, that we could do that, but it's once we replace it, I guess we can still stick to 3 to 5 years.
Deborah, you're muted.
Was it in good condition 3 years ago when it was inspected?
It was relatively better. It wasn't this bad. Otherwise, we would have taken action 3 years back.
Okay. I'm concerned about the timing. That's all.
Right. Yep.
If we can really afford to wait 3 more years before inspecting again.
No, Director Penrose, maybe I didn't clarify it properly. We are going to replace the defective wire this time. We're not waiting for another 3 years, but the next inspection probably we'll wait for another 3 years.
We're going to fix that problem.
Yes, we're going to fix that problem now.
Yeah. Director Slater-Carter.
Can you talk about how much flow was coming in on a Wednesday afternoon from the south, and what implications that has for the plant, since almost all the flow was from Montero was being held, and most of the flow from Granada, except for Frenchman's Creek. So I'm curious if we had say the power had gone out and we had to spend a significant amount of time fixing the power source. We could stop the flow from Montero and most of El Granada. What would we do about the flow from Half Moon Bay?
Well, we had these aeration basin 1 and 2, which we use as an equalization basin. We're able to hold those flows at the primaries and at the aeration basin. And I think over a period of 6 to 8 hours, we got about, I may be mistaken, but maybe we got about 600,000 gallons. We did measure the flow coming in to the plant at 7 and measured it later on at 4 o'clock. I don't have the numbers right now, but if I remember right, it was close to 600,000 gallons.
Okay, so if we had 24 hours, do we have, if we had a 24-hour problem, do we have the storage to hold that?
I don't know. I don't think so. But
Okay.
the flow varies over a period of time. It, you know, we get peaks at times and then it comes down drastically low. So we'll have to see on an average how much it would be.
Thank you.
Director Dodd.
A question. Do you have to do a similar kind of shutdown in order to replace that equipment?
Yes.
Thank you. And compliments on doing this one so efficiently.
I'd just like to comment that this was a good reminder to me, and I think educational for the rate-paying public of just how complicated and multi-component running the wastewater treatment plant is. And it takes this kind of really great coordination and full planning months ahead to do something as complicated, sensitive, and essential as this. And it was completed in great shape. And I just want to say, good job, people.
Thank you.
So we had a question in chat about how much that whole operation cost.
I don't have the figures right now, but I would say it was probably 40,000, including rental of generators, Eaton's inspection costs. I don't have the accurate numbers right now, but I think it'll be somewhere around 50,000, my best guess.
Yeah, you know, if there's time, and maybe George could put together some information, you know, once, you know, we have a handle on it, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, it'll take a while for the invoices to come in, but certainly we can round them up and put it together.
Yeah, I think it would just be interesting information to have.
Sure.
Director Penrose, do you still have a question? Your hand is still up. I guess that's it. That's a marvelous report. Thank you, Kishan. And a marvelous undertaking. Successful, it sounds like. And so when will we be replacing that piece of equipment?
I do not have an answer right now. We are waiting for certain proposals, and depending on the lead time for the cables and others, we'll have to work it out.
Okay.
Not sure.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to attorney's report. Jeremy?
Yes, the hour grows late.
I have one more question. I'll wait until after the attorney's report.
Well, you have 5 more seconds. I have nothing further to report.
Okay. Go ahead, Catherine.
On page 114 on the staff report, Keishan had put together a graph with a list of capital improvement projects and some bars to indicate what percentage of those projects have been paid for. And I'd love to have him give like a 2-minute discussion and show that to the board.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I would like to get feedback on this to see if you'd like to have a report in a different form, or because at the last meeting, there was a comment by one of the directors that they'd like to see something pictorially rather than in numbers and spreadsheets. So that's why we came up with this bar chart, which shows which shows how much was budgeted and how much was remaining project costs. So I'd like to get feedback from you all, whether you'd like to have this, whether you want any changes, any improvements.
I'll have to take a look myself
Okay.
after the meeting. Yeah. Page 114.
And if folks could run it by their general managers as well, so we can keep this as an ongoing report, maybe as part of the general manager's report, so the information is always at hand.
Good point. Director Dye?
I was just going to say, I like the numbers. I like the spreadsheet.
Okay. Thank you. That's important to know. Thank you.
I would like to have one for the year before.
How about a director's report? Anybody directors? Any reports? Okay. Topics for future board consideration. Okay. So do we have any items in closed session?
I do not.
Kishan?
No, I do not.
Okay, well, I think that we could adjourn this meeting, but take a look at page 114 of the staff report. Let us know if you find that table useful, that chart.
I have one comment and maybe question that's not related to anything on the agenda. With the upsurge in COVID that California is supposedly going to be experiencing in the next 2 weeks, it would be very interesting to see a report on our COVID numbers from Sam to see how that correlates and to see if it actually precedes the reporting that's done by the CDC or by the state on increasing COVID cases.
Yes, actually, I had thought about that too. It'd be nice to get some new reports and just see how things are trending for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's a very useful thing to know. And if we can leverage our work on that to get more people in the county to do a similar monitoring effort, I think that would be good. Okay. Is everybody ready to adjourn the meeting? I still see 2 hands up. I need people to be better about lowering your hands when you're done. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. This meeting's adjourned. See you again soon.
Good night.